I have Jewish friends, Muslim friends. I have friends who are Buddhist and Hindu, who are atheists and agnostic across the whole gamut. I have utmost respect for their religious beliefs and their faith practices. I don't feel like it's my role to try to force my beliefs on them or try to convert them. That's something I feel like has distinguished me in terms of my flavor of Christianity, right? I'm not hitting the streets trying to convert people. Would I be out on the street sharing food or offering to pray? Like, absolutely, and I've done that. But with the purpose of trying to force my belief system onto someone else, who has obviously, these cases, their own clear belief system, that doesn't feel right to me. I'd rather have someone, be curious and drawn to my faith in Jesus Christ simply by getting to know me and seeing how I show up as a human being.
Yeah, and seeing the fruit of the Spirit. I feel like you exude as my friend. And one of the examples that I love to follow is that you really do have the intention of exuding the fruit of the Spirit of love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. When the Bible talks about what are Christians supposed to look like, how are we going to be known? And it says they will know us by our love. So if that's not happening, maybe we should go back and read the Bible and try to figure out how to better ourselves, because we can all do better. All of us. Nobody has this figured out, but it's about the intent. Are we going to try to love others in a way that is unconditional? Welcome to the Sacred Slope, where the slippery slope becomes sacred ground. I'm Alexis Rice, and today we are celebrating 1 year together of the Sacred Slope. For me, this was about hope, about widening that lens, and about asking, what does our faith look like beyond the loudest voices of American white Christian nationalism? How can we learn from people all over the world who have dedicated their lives to God and their passion for our Christian faith that just isn't lifted up really in left or right spaces in general? So I wanted to create this space that people who are generally more progressive could feel like they could come here and talk about their Christian faith, whether they're celebrities or politicians, progressive clergy, scholars or authors or artists. And then for people on the far right, they really are interested in one kind of narrative, at least in the United States, that typically uses white Christian nationalism, as Andrew Whitehead says, American idolatry, and those pillars of white Christian nationalism, power, violence, and fear, are really the tools in which our Christian faith has been weaponized. So I wanted to get away from that as much as we could to talk to people outside. If you zoom out and look at the 2 billion people on the planet who are Christians, American white Christian nationalists are a tiny, tiny percent of our global, diverse, inclusive Christian faith. What we have witnessed together this year has been incredible. This show so far has reached listeners in 88 countries, over 1,600 cities. Spotify named The Sacred Slope as a 2025 instant hit, one of the most talked about and shared podcasts in the top 10% of videos. And across social media, these conversations have reached millions of views thanks to you sharing and talking about it and being interested in these unbelievable guests. We've talked to Bishop Marianne Buddy, John Fugelsang, Bishop Gudrun, the Bishop of Iceland, Reverend Joseph Yu, and Pastor Christian A. Smith. We've spoken with Reverend Geraldine Henry and Pastor Paul Dries, with Rocky Roggio from the 1946 film, and artists like John Guerra, Sarah Groves, and Derek Webb, and so many other voices from around the world, different denominations, cultures, lived experiences. At its best, our Christian faith is loving, it is peaceful, it is humble, it is full of servant leadership. And at its worst, it becomes a weapon, a machine of empire, a tool for oppression. We're watching that play out right now. This space exists to say that is not the only version of Christianity. There is a global, diverse, inclusive faith that is alive and well. And beyond this podcast, we've hosted the very first Pastor's Lab with Pastor Paul Dries and Reverend Geraldine Henry. and trained over 200 pastors across 23 countries so far who show up online and share their voices as progressive pastors to help people navigate this very complicated time. I've also been invited into spaces like a UCC conference. I'm going to the Wild Goose Festival and Theology Beer Camp. I attended Ember and built real friendships and community that means so much to me. I'm just really, really grateful. If you've been listening, if this show has meant something to you, I know that this space can feel really confusing about who gets paid and who doesn't. I've given actually 30 to 60 hours a week to this for the last year consistently as a ministry. It's been something that I have felt called to build. And outside of the pastor's lab, I have made a total of around $30 in donations. I cover the tools, the subscriptions, the equipment, and even the music from Brett Rutledge, Eddie Irvin, and Sean Spence was done as a ministry. I made a decision at the beginning of this year that I would give this a full year before ever really asking for support. We're here now. And so if this has meant something to you, if it has helped you feel less alone or help you see faith in a new way, if you are interested in continuing to hear from amazing guests all over the world, I would love you to consider a one-time gift or something monthly, because there's so much more that I want to build and allocate my time to. I'd love to pay the music team to create a Sacred Slope theme, full song, maybe even a full album one day. I'd love the time and support to write a book, to bring on help, to keep this growing. I know where I want it to go. One day, I'd like to name it. I would love to be part of something bigger, to be under a network like Harpo Productions or Crooked Media, spaces that are shaping culture that don't always have the strong, thoughtful Christian voice that is able to navigate the Christian faith all over the world from progressive viewpoints. And I think that voice really matters, both in conservative and in progressive media. I think that the response that you guys have been giving, the really positive feedback, people who have said things like, maybe I would even consider going back to church again, or like, I didn't know church could be like this, or I didn't know the Christian faith was what I thought it was all along. Continuing to expose people to this instead of white Christian nationalism, I think it really matters. I really want to thank you again. We're building this together. If you're not in a place to give, the easiest way to support the show, along with prayer, I think that's really important, is to pause right now and rate and review it so more people can find it. Come find me on social media. There's so much goodness coming along in year 2, and I'm really glad you're here for it. I want to extend a special shout out to Derek Webb for letting me use his music in this special anniversary episode. It really colors it in and makes it so beautiful. Derek Webb was one of the first people to be willing to take a chance on me when I had pretty much no platform. Thank you, Derek, and thank you for your magical music. Today, we're going to talk with one of my best friends. Her name is Christina Zini. We've lived in different countries together. We have gone through so much in our Christian faith together. For those of you who are deconstructing or finding shifts in your faith, or you're feeling really alone, find a friend, even if they're far away, to start talking with on a regular basis. I can't tell you how much it means when you can talk with somebody else through this and not go through things alone. Let's get started.
Scream and voices fly like sling and stone. The hate they wield, a sharpened knife, it cuts the hole. They twist the truth, they spread the fear to hide the lie. When the world feels dark and the path unclear, you realize, child, this may be the time to close your eyes. Imagination banned for all the books you've read. They misdirect sugar words and bullet breath. The news reports a broken song of rights denied. They build their walls around your heart in crooked lines. Child, this may be the time to close your eyes. The preachers rage, the pundits sneer, a war of words. They twist religion, make it hate, they lock the doors. Their moral high ground planted flags, their martyrs' cries. They judge and scorn and fail to see the rainbow skies. Child, this may be the time to close your eyes. But listen softly for the sound, the burning fuse. Igniting painters, activists, prophets bringing news of family stories, hearts and minds opening wide. The hopes of all the painted bruises realized, of all God's children's thriving lives. May this be the day of husbands, husbands, wives, and wives. May this be the day when beauty's beauty and love is love. May this be the day. Thank God you're safe and you're enough. May this be the day when all the faceless hear their names. Let this be the night when all the shapeless rest in frames. Let this be the night when all the tears are wiped away. Let this be the night when all true justice falls like rain. Let this be the night. Oh child, this may be the time. Open up your eyes. Open up your eyes. Open up your eyes. Open up your eyes.
Welcome back, friends. Today I am joined by a very, very dear friend of mine. This is Christina Zini.
Hi, Alexis.
Hi. Today she is going to share her testimony. Christina and I have been friends for, oh boy, maybe almost 20 years. I respect her so much, her faith, her voice. She's been an incredible Christian friend in my life. So Christina, thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Alexis. I really appreciate the invitation to join the Sacred Slope. I have been truly enjoying the episodes that I've listened to. So I was honored that you asked me to join as a guest and be part of, this wonderful initiative that you've put out into the world. So thank you. Obviously, you and I go back a long ways. We first met in Amsterdam when we were both living there. I think at the time, both had Dutch boyfriends, but hadn't yet married them. We're married to them now, but we had that bond of being like two Americans living abroad in relationships with Dutch guys and just bonded, I think, also over sort of similar values, indeed, of faith and just the way that we looked at the world. And so, to your point, like you have been such a gift to me as well, really just a blessing as a friend and as a sister in Christ. And I truly think about you, kind of being my savior throughout the pandemic. You were like the friend that I always called for emotional support and figuring things out.
Same friend.
So I have such positive feelings about you and the role that you've played over the last 20 years.
Well, thank you. So yeah, tell us your story. Tell us about your earliest memories of faith and church. How did you grow up? Kind of spiritual curiosity did you have?
I grew up in a really small town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It's actually a beautiful city called Marquette. It's right on Lake Superior. I grew up in a part of the country that is not particularly like racial or ethnically diverse. There were other forms of diversity, but it was predominantly Caucasian. And I was raised in the Lutheran faith, specifically Lutheran Missouri Synod. There are different Christian denominations, and then it turns out even within a denomination, there are different variations of that denomination. I was raised though in a very like warm, accepting, positive church environment. And I think that made all the difference and as to who I am today. And when I think back on my childhood and my formative years in the church, it is mostly very positive, fun memories of being part of youth programs. We had a great pastor, Pastor Paul Weber. He made all the difference. His style, his tone, it was very contemporary style church at that time, which it wasn't quite very common at that time to have this kind of contemporary style of worship and to have a pastor who was married. He had 4 kids of his own and really was just a very kind of down to earth pastor that everybody could relate to. Really felt like you were showing up at church. And like I said, not particularly racially or ethnically diverse, but certainly like diversity in terms of types of people, socioeconomic backgrounds, neurodiversity, and so forth. It just really felt like a pretty accepting environment. Some of my not so great memories have to do with being forced to like recite all the chapters of the Bible, right? And memorizing them and then having to recite them. Like that was no fun, right? I remember this getting into big trouble during confirmation with another friend of mine for like stealing Kool-Aid crystals from the church kitchen and just mouthing off and stuff like that. So, I mean, those are those memories of really just me kind of getting into mischief. But like, I would say that that kind of pales in comparison to like the overall very positive, warm, uplifting environment that I grew up in.
You mentioned confirmation. For people who were raised like I was in non-denominational churches that didn't have a mainline kind of tint, I always assumed that confirmation was just what Catholics do. Can you tell us a little bit more about in your tradition what that means for you? Because we just pray sinner's prayer and we're done. Oh, that's what we do around 7, 8 years old. We ask Jesus into our heart and then we get baptized if we want to, whenever we want. And then we're good. Souls are saved.
I was confirmed in the Lutheran church, and like literally just this past school year, my oldest son is now confirmed in the Methodist church that we're going to. So I have a very recent experience. While there are some differences, they're basically the same principle of like you're going through a year or 2 years of learning the Bible and learning about your denomination and making a public confirmation of your faith. This is what I believe, and I believe in Jesus Christ. Methodist versus the Lutheran version is like you're learning a little bit more of the specific denominational doctrine, what underlies that, but it is all very much Bible based. So by and large, is sort of 98% the same kind of learnings that are taught in confirmation. They really made it a lot of fun and engaging for the students who are mostly like 6th and 7th graders in our confirmation class.
When did you start experiencing questions or tensions or misalignment with the traditions, with the beliefs that you had been taught?
My church, while they had specific teachings from the Bible, specifically around the 10 Commandments, I don't ever remember them like pushing a lot of social or cultural values upon us. I would say that certain values were certainly instilled by my parents, which probably reflected, their bringing. My dad was raised Catholic. My mom was also raised Lutheran, but she was raised at a time where it was probably a more conservative version of Lutheran. I use that with like a small c. And for me, as I said, I was raised in a more like contemporary style church and a more modern version of Lutheranism at that time. I don't really remember there being a lot of disconnect. What I remember about myself from a very young age is that I always firmly believed in loving and accepting people for however God made them and for however they choose to love. I was raised in a really small town, but we actually had quite a few LGBTQIA members in our community. Many of them were dear friends of mine and still are to this day. And I remember being a child who I didn't necessarily have like a label for it, I didn't have the vocabulary for it. But I just knew, like instinctively, that there was something else about them. And it didn't matter to me. I just loved them for who they were. That has been a through line through my entire life from a very young age. I've always loved and accepted my LGBTQIA siblings and firmly believe that that's the way that God made them to be. I see the God in them and I celebrate that. I never felt any conflict from the church that I grew up in. And similarly, I've always very much believed in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body and her own livelihood. And again, I don't know necessarily if that was instilled by my parents as much as it was perhaps me learning and responding to the society that I was growing up in. But those two things have been forever clear to me. And so I've always sought out churches that aligned, with those sort of two core beliefs. I haven't had to do a lot of the same sort of like reconciliation as some of my other siblings in Christ who maybe grew up in a different denomination where they really had to deconstruct or unpack, the ways in which they were thinking about it. I really feel like there was clear and positive alignment with what I felt in my heart to be true and important to me. And then, what was being taught and reinforced in the church environment.
Oh, that sounds relatively healthy, the way you were supported. Talk to us about your spiritual life. What are the practices? What are the communities or the ideas that feel life-giving to you now that you're an adult and, you could choose to go anywhere you want?
Beyond growing up as a Lutheran in Marquette, Michigan, I went off to university and then Washington, D.C. And then my career took me overseas. I lived in Europe for a while. I lived in the Middle East, then Alaska, and then Houston, Texas. I mention that because my faith journey, it's not been a straight line whatsoever. It's been this kind of weaving path where I've weaved in different experiences. And certainly living abroad, traveling so much has just opened my mind. It's made me much more of like a truly accepting, open person. Faith wise, though, I would say like typical for college students, young adults, I wasn't a regular churchgoer. I still considered myself a Christian, but it wasn't like I was going every Sunday in the way that I was raised. I was certainly still going for holidays. When I lived in Amsterdam, I did try out different churches and I wanted English speaking churches. That was what's important to me. There weren't very many options, as you will remember, Alexis. I went to an Anglican church and I went to some Catholic churches. And those were far more formal, very traditional kind of churches, which really didn't gel with like who I was and what I was looking for in a church. And also, like I said, I mean, I was raised in a church that, well, there were certainly some traditional elements to it, still felt a little bit more contemporary and it invited a lot more of a, like the casual worship style in. So I was looking for that. And then I eventually, like I said, married this Dutchman and we went off to the Middle East. And it was really there that I started to attend worship more regularly. I found this wonderful church in Doha, which was non-denominational, founded and led by people from South Africa. And this was a really pivotal point in my faith for a variety of reasons. And so on a deeply personal level, this was also when my husband and I were trying to start a family. We were really struggling to conceive. And my whole infertility journey was very much faith journey. It was really about me having to like lean into my faith, truly trust in God and believe that God has a plan for me, for my husband, that eventually God will hear and answer our prayers for a child. So we were going to this particular church, which I found so liberating. I love the way that Africans worship. They worship with their whole body. It's this like physically involved in the worship music and the message. They're not just sort of standing there singing in the way that I was raised, which was like, you just sort of stand there with your hymnal in a controlled fashion and sing along, usually off tune. But worshiping with the Africans, like I said, it was this whole body experience. Like I just felt so moved by the spirit every time I was in that environment, going to church and worshiping, going to that church, being part of that community, and really learning to lean into my faith was transformative for me. It made such a difference. We eventually, though, left there, went to Alaska to another non-denominational church there. We were only there for a short time, so it wasn't quite the same impact. We did church shop for a while until we found this particular non-denominational church where we went. And it was also very spirit filled. I didn't ask a lot of questions though about like sort of what the belief systems of the church were or who they welcomed through their doors. But then when we moved to Houston, we spent about a year church shopping and we tried all kinds of different denominations. We tried Baptist churches and more non-denominational churches and Episcopalian churches. Eventually we ended up Memorial Drive United Methodist. And what really sold us was the worship band. As that often does, right? Like we just really loved the worship band and the worship band leader at the time. So I was just like sold on the music. However, I knew at this point who I was and what was important to me and my faith journey that I had to ask the question to the pastors before I committed that this was going to be like our home church, if they were welcoming to the LGBTQIA community. I needed to know that. I could not go to a church that wouldn't welcome and accept my siblings in Christ. So I asked the lead pastor that. After we'd gone a couple of times, I went up to him at the end of the service and I asked them specifically, are you welcoming and accepting to the LGBTQIA community? And I said, I have a lot of gay friends and I need to know, that they would be welcome here, that they would be accepted, that they could come to church with me if that's what they wanted to do. And he said, yes, absolutely. And he mentioned to other church members that were part of that community. Then I thought, okay, I can continue coming here then. We can stay. And that hasn't been particularly like a focal point or an issue. We just knew like, all right, we can continue to worship here, enjoy the band, and know that this is a church that is indeed open, to all of God's people. worship on Sundays as you will, and definitely appreciate more of the like contemporary worships, with the band and also the more casual dress and environment. That feels very similar to, where we went to church in Doha. It feels contemporary also in terms of its openness and acceptance, sort of worldviews. We don't go to a church that's like overtly political one way or the other. They are really focused again on teaching the Bible, and they do bring in like contemporary messaging or like even funny video clips from something on TV or a meme. Our pastors are really creative in how they bring in modern culture combined with biblical teachings. So I love that about them. I would say, my relationship with Christ is complicated. Not on Christ's end of it, but on my end of it. Um, I think for God, it's very simple and straightforward. It's unconditional love. But for me, I'm human. I'm a messy human. And so I bring the complication into it with episodes of just not trusting, of trying to retain all the control, like holding on, white knuckling super tightly. And so for me, I believe my soul's journey is just really to like trust and let go. That seems to be like the most meaningful, powerful message that I continue to hear when I tune into God is just trust and let go and trust that God is working to make all things the way that he intends, and that I can just truly like let go and lean into that trust. I think about, you know, Proverbs 3 verse 5 and 6 about, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That has always been like a very powerful verse for me and continues to be so in this current moment.
It's interesting, isn't it? Church shopping. Like, if you think about if you've ever shopped for a car, how much research and time we put into that, right? Like, I want the dashboard to be this way, and the engine needs to be like this, or I want it to be an EV. All these things. We spend so much time with church shopping. It's so important to be discerning. It's also a lot harder, I think, to church shop, especially before the internet. You have to go on a Sunday, you have to give up your morning, and you don't know if you're going to like it or appreciate it. And then what if your kids don't like it or they do? And what's the fit and what are the morals and the values? And it sounds like you have been to many churches all over the world. You could have just been like, screw it, I'm not going to do church stuff. It's too hard. For people who might be considering, like, hey, I don't know if I'm in the right church that's like filling my soul in the way I want it to, or maybe I don't feel welcome here, or I just don't really agree with the filter, the lens that is put on top of Christianity in this church, which all churches do. We all have a lens. What kind of ideas do you have for people as they shop for a church that aligns with their values more strongly?
What I would say is word of mouth, talking to people that you trust, asking around, whether it's been on social media, if you're looking for recommendations of churches to try. I also think that indeed looking at a church's website, reading through what they've published publicly, looking at their social media, looking at images to see what does the congregation, does it look diverse? You can't always tell, but there's basic ways that you can see, does this really look like the kind of place that's going to be open and inclusive and supportive and affirming? And then indeed, you do have to try, because as much as you hear from other people or you see something online, you really have to just go and find out. And you can't always know in one attendance either. You often have to go multiple times and figure out, is this like really where God is leading me to be? Because I do believe that God is the one who's leading us to find the right church community for us. So just again, stepping out in faith and trusting that God will lead you to the right community.
Let's talk about, let's say, the last 10 to 15 years and the struggles that you and I have had talking together about watching the rise of Christian nationalism all around us and being Christians ourselves and really understanding internally the place that that comes from. We understand that most people who might declare themselves or not declare themselves, but are Christian nationalists, are really good, wonderful, loving, kind people that you know, go to church with, and they might be conservative on certain beliefs, and that's great. And that's kind of how we grew up, right? Something has changed from when we were younger. How has that hit you? How has that affected you? And how has that affected your faith?
Well, my faith hasn't changed. In fact, in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm doubling down because I think it's very important for Christians who are still standing firm in the basic tenets of Christianity and God's love and acceptance for all of his people. I think it's very important that Christians speak up, you know, against some of the messages that, at least from my perspective, are really not Christian messages. They perhaps started with some basic Christian values, but have been, for whatever reason, convoluted and twisted and turned and then weaponized. One of the words that always makes me a little bit uncomfortable is when people talk about wokeness. I bring this up because I don't see my personal love and acceptance and desire for social and racial justice as being woke, some kind of like reverse racism. That's not how I see it at all. I truly see it as this is how I've been raised as a Christian, which is to love and support people who have less advantage or less privilege than I, to uplift the poor, to lend a helping hand. And I'm acutely aware of the privilege that I have in this world because of the family I grew up in and the community I came from, the fact that indeed I am afforded white privilege. And that makes me indeed more compassionate and empathetic and wanting to do more to uplift and support the people of color around me, to leverage privilege in a positive way to make an impact, to uplift and elevate. I'm a big believer that all boats will rise. I don't think it has to be some people are up and some people are down. I really feel like we can all lift each other up and that I can play an instrumental role in that. So the labels around wokeness, they just don't sit well with me because, again, I feel like I'm acting out of my own Christian beliefs, out of my own faith. And those values are informing me to show up in the world and have a big, generous heart for the poor and for immigrants and for people of color who have been oppressed and disadvantaged and for LGBTQIA siblings and the many other communities that tend to be underrepresented or oppressed. So that's just where I feel like God is working through me and flowing through me through God's love, just pouring it back in to the people around me. If you go back to the Bible and you think about all these biblical stories, and you even think about Pope Leo, Pope Francis, the focus is on being of service to other people from a place of humility, a place of love, of really just pouring into the people around you and wanting to help and serve and uplift other people. So that is where my heart is. It's certainly what fuels the kind of work I do. I work in leadership development, and I specifically focus coaching and developing women leaders, other leaders as well. But I love to work with, again, diverse leaders and supporting their growth and just really helping to lift them and help them unlock their fullest potential. I don't talk about my faith with my clients, but from my perspective, I feel like I'm God's instrument, that God is working through me to support my clients and bringing out the God in them, all of the goodness and all the beauty and all the talents and gifts that they have.
I couldn't agree with you more on the word woke as a slur. I find it offensive because I think it shows a lack of empathy, which is part of the problem. And Christians feel that it's important to live out caring for others, especially the least of these. So that is part of how we are supposed to show up in the world. You mentioned women in leadership. I know that that is super important to you. Why is it important to you that women are showing up as leaders?
Because women's voices matter. Our voices matter. We bring diverse viewpoints. We bring some of these more feminine qualities. I don't mean to stereotype because, of course, there are men that are compassionate and empathetic and sensitive and intuitive. And there are men as well that possess a lot of those qualities that we think of as feminine. But I really believe that women's voices were often marginalized. I mean, there's plenty of evidence of that. And even today, although women have made many strides in equal rights and having more of a voice and reaching the upper echelons of organization, we still have a long way to go. And so whatever I can do to support and uplift, not just shatter the glass ceiling, but also we call it fixing the broken rung on the ladder that brings women upwards. I will continue to do that. That's my life's work and what I'm most passionate about.
We grew up in church in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, where purity culture was huge in evangelical fundamentalist spaces in America. And oh man, that was a really big deal, especially in high schools. We had purity rings. We had signed pledges that we would stay abstinent until we were married. We had rules at church camp and junior high. We couldn't wear two pieces because modest is hottest. And we didn't want to be temptresses to the men that couldn't control their own urges. It was all on the women. It wasn't on us. Of course, you have to be straight. Of course, you have to save yourself for marriage, no exceptions. And if you don't, then there are all these kinds of examples we were given, testimonies from people who did have sex before they were married and said, I see ghosts of other, exes in my sex life. That was a big, scare of like, this is bad. Or they took, the idea of it being like chewed gum, smashing it together and saying, you can't unchew gum, or taking two paper dolls and putting them together with glue and then ripping them apart. Your really value decreases if you decide to have sex before you're married or even engage in anything sexual. That was a little bit of purity culture and evangelical fundamentalism. How did you grow up in church, in Lutheran or Methodist or kind of more mainline denominations?
Yeah, so I didn't experience any of the purity culture in my church, meaning that I don't feel like it was a message that was regularly communicated or reinforced. I grew up with parents who raised me to believe that, you wait until you're married. You fall in love and you get married, and then this is what you do, but you wait. So that's very much how my parents raised me, but I don't remember specifically hearing that message from the church. So I really didn't grow up in purity culture. And the people around me weren't taking part in that culture either. That isn't to say that we weren't being taught like this same message, like it's best to wait. And the reality of it is, like we know today, is that most people aren't waiting, right? So there was this kind of balance of like, it's best to wait, but if you do, here's what you need to know. Here are the ways that you protect yourself and so forth. So I felt like I got a little more of a measured message when it came to sex before marriage, so to speak.
Wow. So that exists within Christian cultures. Look at that.
It does. And like I said, it's not to say that the Lutheran Church or what the United Methodist Church today, what those beliefs are, they may still be very much a wait until you're married. I still think there's very much like that whole undercurrent in most Christian faiths, that is like the basic belief. But like I said, I think we've evolved with the reality of our culture and the relationships that people are having. And also, I think there's been a lot more focus on the equality between men and women and the importance of coming back to women's ownership and agency over their own bodies and their lives and the choices that they want to make. From my own perspective, I also feel like I was raised to really respect and honor other people's religious beliefs. I have had Jewish friends. I have Jewish friends. I have Muslim friends. I have friends who are Buddhist and Hindu, who are atheists and agnostic across the whole gamut. I have
Mhm.
utmost respect for their religious beliefs and their faith practices. I don't feel like it's my role to try to force my beliefs on them or try to convert them. That's something I feel like has distinguished me in terms of like my flavor of Christianity, right? Is that I'm not the kind of person who's like hitting the streets trying to convert people. Would I be out on the street sharing food or offering to pray? Like, absolutely. And I've done that, but with the purpose of trying to force my belief system onto someone else, who has obviously, these cases, their own clear belief system. That doesn't feel right to me. I'd rather have someone be curious and drawn to my faith in Jesus Christ simply by getting to know me and seeing how I show up as a human being than
Mhm.
having it be like me forcing my beliefs onto them.
Yeah, and seeing the fruit of the Spirit. I feel like you exude as my friend, and one of the examples that I love to follow is that you really do have the intention of exuding the fruit of the Spirit of love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. When the Bible talks about what are Christians supposed to look like, how are we going to be known? And it says they will know us by our love. So if that's not happening, maybe we should go back and read the Bible and try to figure out how to better ourselves, because we can all do better. All of us. Nobody has this figured out, but it's about the intent. Are we going to try to love others in a way that is unconditional?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and thank you for that acknowledgement. I am certainly not perfect. As I said, my relationship with Jesus is complicated on my side, and I certainly have, of course, many imperfections and character flaws that I'm constantly working on and working through. Coming back to like that formative experience when I was living in Doha, Qatar, and going to a Christian church, we were one of 3 or 4 Christian churches in that country. And we were allowed to exist thank you to the Qatari royal family who gave permission for the Catholic Church to be established and for these few Christian churches to establish themselves. We were meeting basically just in this like large private, it was a home, but it was used for a church. There was no signage. There are no crosses. You could not be out on the street talking about your faith, trying to convert people. Like that was absolutely prohibited. You're allowed to simply come together again and worship and commune and listen to those messages. But there were some real restrictions in place around it. What I learned in living in a Muslim country for almost 5 years is that Judaism and Islam and Christianity were all at one point one religion, and they share the basic tenet. All right. So there's a lot more commonalities than we like to think about or that we even acknowledge. We are not each other's enemies. We're brothers and sisters. And the real bottom line differentiator is the interpretation of Jesus Christ in those 3 different religions. There are plenty of others, but like that's the big one. It was also from that perspective that I can build relationships with people of different faiths than I do, knowing there's so much that we share and that we have in common that we value. And it really comes back to love, valuing humanity and seeing God in each one of us. I see it in you and I see it in this other person. And it doesn't really matter our exact belief system or how we're praying to God and how we interpret Jesus Christ. That source of love and God within us is the same.
It's such a great reminder of how can I see the image of God in that person? Not just my friend, but my enemy or someone I don't understand. Maybe I can start by looking for the image of God in them because it's in them too. Even if I can't see it, that just means I can't see it. So maybe I should try to find it.
Well, and I speak in generalizations, but by and large, most of us in this world just want to coexist peacefully, right? There are extremists examples within all these different religions. And that's what we hear
Yeah.
about in the news and in the headlines.
And no religion as well. You see that in certain countries that don't allow any faith.
Exactly. These are everyday people practicing their faith and their belief system in ways that are very true and aligned with the basic tenets of Christianity or Judaism or of Islam. And to remind myself of that, I feel like is really important. It influences my worldview and how I look at people, how I meet people who are different than me, who have different religious or cultural backgrounds. It's just made me, I think, more accepting and more open to all of God's people.
Yes, because we are all of God's children, no matter what we believe.
I talked about how I grew up really valuing a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that has been a through line for my life as well. And what I mean by that is that, my children, they're all conceived by the gift of IVF, which I always say is like a beautiful marriage of science and faith. That's the God in it. So I was able to proceed and make decisions about my body, and my husband and I making decisions about our family because of that. After completing my family, I'm a proud mom of 3 sons. I made a choice to have an elective double mastectomy and to have a full hysterectomy, had all of my reproductive organs removed to reduce my risk of breast and ovarian cancer. And those are decisions that to me are very personal. And I would hate to have the ability to make those kind of decisions about my body and my family taken away from me. I come at it not because I terminated a pregnancy. I had the opposite problem, but I have many friends and family members close to me who make that difficult choice. And I would never want to impart my values on them. I'd like to them to make the decision that's right for them and right for their families, and whatever their beliefs are be. And then I can do the same for me. So that indeed is, I think, is still a very important tenet to my faith and to my foundational values, and also to the work that I do in supporting women and really empowering them to make decisions about their bodies, about their finances, about their careers, about their leadership, about their families. I was also reminded of very personal experience. After my first son was born, I actually had a postpartum blood clot, and it was a pretty sizable clot. Hopefully, this isn't TMI, but I experienced some postpartum bleeding, which prompted me to go back to my doctor's office. That's when they discovered this blood clot. And basically, it was a life threatening blood clot. They rushed me in to the surgical suite and performed a DNC to clear that blood clot. And I am constantly reminded of how that procedure saves women's lives. We associate it with the termination of a pregnancy, but at the same time, women who are going through miscarriages also need that procedure to save their lives. And then on the back end of a successful pregnancy and live birth, women like me need it to save their lives if they're still experiencing some postpartum bleeding. So I can't say enough sort of supportive, both from a faith-based as well as a science-based rationale for ensuring that we have this life-saving procedure.
I think it's so important to have these conversations together within a Christian context, because quite frankly, I think at least half, or probably the vast majority of people who consider themselves Christians also are really against just blanketly having abortion rights taken away, reproductive rights taken away from us. And part of that is because we as women go through so many different experiences that have to do with our bodies that, quite frankly, like, men do not understand. And then if they understand because they see their partner or someone they love going through it, they still don't get it like we get it. And so it's wild to me to have, mostly men making up these laws and rules that they truly don't understand the stories and the implications of what they are. They just go to the binary. That's how it feels like it's gone. Anytime someone tries to bring up hey, we should have the right to make choices about our own body. They go, oh, well, you believe in killing babies in the 9 months when they're being born. That's such a red herring. And we really need to bring that back into the nuance of, no, I don't think anybody thinks that's okay. Let's talk about your experience that you had a DNC. Well, a DNC is a dilation and curettage, which is an abortion. I also had a miscarriage. We still don't talk about this very much. Some of us miscarry naturally when we find out that for genetic reasons or for whatever reason, the pregnancy is not going to come to term. And some of us do not get the luxury of it happening naturally. I also was in that bucket and had a DNC or an abortion, and I was in complete grief and sadness. And I wanted to, though, make sure that I was being taken care of. And so doctors took care of me in order to preserve my health, but also to ensure that my body was prepared and cleaned out properly so that I could produce life. And I did. I went on to have 2 daughters, and that's incredible. And I'm so thankful to my doctors. But there are people that are literally just trying to put nuance to the side, saying, we're just going to take this away completely without really understanding what's going on. So I thank you for your story. Why do you think it's important for us also as Christians to speak up that we really believe in having rights to our own bodies, also as a Christian value?
Perhaps I'm one of the few that doesn't feel any misalignment between being a Christian and having complete faith in Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit, and also still absolutely believing in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. I believe that God created us and gave us these bodies, and also these scientific discoveries and advances and the tools and the techniques and the hands of the surgeons. I see that all of those as like divine gifts as well, in order for us to, in some ways, create life, in some ways, prolong life, to improve our health. And like I've said before, I haven't been in a position, that very difficult position to terminate a pregnancy, but I have women who are close to me that have made that difficult decision. Again, I don't feel like it's my place to decide that for them. I feel like they can make those decisions within their own families or their relationships or for themselves. They can have that conversation with God and decide what's the right choice for them. Right? I've made decisions in my conversation with God and with my husband, and I made decisions, as I said, to have my body parts removed and all my reproductive organs removed in order to prolong my life. And I truly believe that God led me through that. He was the one that guided me to that decision, to the surgeons who could perform those life-saving procedures. He was very much part of my healing and who I am today. And because of that, I am a healthy mom, to my 3 children. Thankfully, I had that DNC after I had my son, because not only am I alive for him as a mother, but with that procedure, I was able to still continue on and have another pregnancy, which was a twin pregnancy at that, right? A high risk pregnancy, but I had a healthy womb and I could do that. I could bring 2 more lives into the world. And so that's really where, my beliefs stem from. And I realize my beliefs are different from other people, and that's okay. But again, fundamentally, I really believe that it's important for a woman to make her own decisions about her body.
Yeah. And, I know plenty of conservative Christian women who have had abortions. And what makes me so sad is how those women have been made to feel such shame around those decisions and still carry that shame and trauma today. Often, again, by men superimposing this binary that, hey, if you're part of our club, our conservative Christian club, you have to believe in all cases that abortion is wrong. and never even asked women about their experiences, about their reasons, there would be such shame put over that. So a lot of people carry this secret or carry this story or this trauma and are continuously being made to feel like, oh, well, if you had an abortion, then you're some godless liberal. And I think we need to bring a little bit of understanding and lift up women's stories. We need to gather some more care and understanding that this is not just about having abortions late term. Like, nobody wants to do that. The vast majority of this happens in the beginning. And if you don't understand these situations, you should ask people. You should ask women, because most women have gone through some sort of fertility trouble, and they can share their stories with you. And we can start learning and having a little bit more of an understanding of maybe we shouldn't be outlawing this, and maybe we should be giving people some rights to talk about this with their partners and their doctors and with their clergy members and with God, and not with these politicians who just think they know better.
Yeah, so true. I mean, and what you said about shame, I mean, you and I both know that shame is not of God, right? That shame that women feel around having made that difficult decision to terminate a pregnancy. And I've seen on the flip side of young women, like young women, having a baby out of wedlock and feeling shame about that as well, that they were young and had a baby out of wedlock. And I'd like to come to a point where we can shed those shackles of shame. We can release ourselves from that shame, come back to this fundamental belief that God is love and God is calling us to love one another and to support and to refrain from that judgment, to really trust again that that individual is going to have that relationship with God and with the people that are involved, and whatever the circumstances are, that they will make the right decision, for themselves as an individual and for their families.
Yeah. And a lot of people who have abortions are mothers already. And the condescending talk to women as if we don't understand what we're getting ourselves into. When you hear from people that are saying, oh, you just shouldn't in any circumstance. And it's like, well, yeah, but maybe you don't understand my circumstance. If you really are pro-life, then are you supporting policies in this country? If you are going to force people to have children, are you creating the safety nets for those people, because they are mostly poor and Black and brown moms, in order to help people raise those kids, to feed those kids, to clothe those kids, to give them money for their hospital bills? Did you know if you had a C-section, my C-section, which was not something I planned on, I asked to not have a C-section, but it was to help save my baby's life. The bill at the hospital for 6 nights in America was $90,000. So if you are forcing a mom who is a young woman, let's say, or not, to have a baby, who's going to pay the hospital bill? You don't understand this, then let's start gathering some stories and start learning from each other.
Yeah, amen. My viewpoints on some of these, let's call them controversial topics, very much reflect the beliefs that I held at a really young age. I mean, even as a young child, what I knew to be true. They didn't necessarily align with what my parents were teaching me. I think my parents um, definitely like cultivated some of these views, especially my mother, with the openness and the acceptance for all of God's people, and knowing that as a woman, she was making choices about her body. So that the influence and the kind of shaping of my views was certainly there. Where I want to point out is that I don't know necessarily that these were like beliefs held by the Lutheran Church or by my pastor at that time, or the Methodist Church at this point. In the environment that I grew up in the Lutheran Church, and then in the environment that I'm in this United Methodist Church, I personally still feel like quite comfortable, and like there is at least enough alignment with my personal views and the church views that I can continue to worship in that space. I'm also not someone that has to have like completely one-to-one alignment. I'm really comfortable like with the gray space and being able to navigate through that. And again, also do so with a belief that what my beliefs are, they work for me. I don't need to push them onto other people. We don't need to be all in line, but we can still show up here in faith and worshiping our Lord and Savior. There's enough of the sort of basics that we all agree on. And what we don't agree on, I think it's okay to do so. Again, like respectfully and gracefully, refrain from judging each other.
We are going to move on to our lightning round, Christina. A faith phrase or Christianese saying that drives you nuts.
It's God's will.
Why?
Because I think when you say that to someone else or someone says that to you, it's really like disempowering. It sort of like invalidates whatever that person might be feeling underneath or processing as a result of like the situation that they're in.
A spiritual practice you never thought you'd try, but ended up loving.
Going to sort of one of these like revivalist like gatherings at one of my churches. It's probably not the right terminology for it, but it was like super spirit led and kind of people collapsing, feeling moved by the spirit. I never really thought I'd try it, but I did. I was there.
Question you're still carrying with you.
What's heaven like?
Piece of advice you wish that you had ignored.
That your faith has to like look a certain way, that it has to be performed in a certain way.
Worship song.
Oceans by Hillsong. I love that song, and that is very much about stepping out in faith and really trusting in God.
A Bible verse.
2 verses, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. That was my mom's favorite verse, and I didn't talk about my mom, but she passed away from ovarian cancer. She used to make these beautiful crosses with like made from driftwood and pine cones, and she would write that verse on the back of each one. And secondly, Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding.
Well, Christina Zini, thank you so much. There is nothing like a friend that you can go through life with. We haven't lived in the same city for years, but our friendship carries through because we really invest in it together. I can't thank you enough for sharing your story today and for being part of my life as a woman, as a half American, half Dutch family, as a fellow Christian.
Well, thank you, Alexis. Thanks for having me on the Sacred Slope.
So this year, some goals. Find some clergy members online that you're resonating with. Go to churchclarity.org and look for an open and affirming church that allows women in leadership. Type in your zip code if you're in the United States. If you're good at this stuff, consider building something either in your country or a global directory where we can start having more clarity around churches that are open and affirming, that are progressive in their theology, that are not holding on to Bible literalism, so you can feel like you know what you're getting into and understanding before you go into that church. And then think about service this year from a Christian perspective. Maybe you've been sitting on the sidelines for a long time, but maybe you're like, you know what? I am a Christian and nobody can tell me otherwise, and I'm going to get more done inside this Christian faith making change than sitting on the sidelines. So do it. Reclaim this space. This is our faith too. Nobody can tell us that we are not Christians. You understand? And finally, find a friend who can go through this with you. Find the joy in deconstruction. Find the joy in learning more about our faith. Know that there are so many people all around the world that are brilliant, that want to help you and who have dedicated their time in life to teaching you. And fortunately, with new media, a lot of them are online. If you're a pastor or a clergy member or a Bible scholar, keep finding ways to be able to use your voice, your knowledge, and your years and years of study to help lay people. We really need you right now. I think a big key for midterms and for our elections in the United States is for progressive clergy to start raising their voices and to allow people who are on the fence, who are in the middle of the United States, are not sure that they're allowed to be Christians and Democrats, Christians and independents who lean liberal, to give them that understanding that they are not doing anything wrong or heretical, but they're actually being faithful to the loving God that they see and understand already. They just need to see you and they need to learn from you. Thank you for joining us today on the Sacred Slope. If you'd like to nominate a pastor, priest, or clergy member anywhere in the world, send me an email at alexis@thesacredslope.com. Music was by Brett Rutledge, Eddie Irvin, and Sean Spence. May the fruit of the Spirit guide you this week. I'm Alexis Rice. Go in peace, friends.
just what to say to me. Oh, I was there too. It won't be this way forever. Someone's our emotion. Oh, you don't have to cover up. Sometimes scars are as literal as brands and notes, and they always show up down your arms. 'Cause there's a cost that must be paid to tear down these walls you built just to keep you safe. And I was there too. It won't be this way forever. Forever. The conditions of love in the calligraphy of pain. You had to write it all down so you'd never be the same. You may not have noticed me, oh, we all look the same. When you're feeling the weight of the world, barely 13 and fighting for your life every day. But when you paid for your coffee, oh, your shirt sleeve got pushed up. Probably nobody noticed just before you pulled it down, and your cheeks got flushed on your face. Oh, I saw in you what I knew in me, and I risked a nose tucked in your coffee sleep. Said I was there too. It won't be this way forever. Oh, I was there too. It won't be this way forever.
Oh, and if you like this content, make sure to follow The Sacred Slope on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at The Sacred Slope. You can watch on YouTube or Spotify, and you can listen on Apple and everywhere you get your podcasts. Till next time.